Hello, my name is Jonathan Allman, and today I'm going to share one of my favorite thinkers, philosophers, and technological innovators of all time, Terence McKenna. Now, as we delve into this presentation, you're going to begin to understand that Terence McKenna was a very crackpotish type of thinker, yet he is deemed one of the top 5 most influential and important thinkers of all time. Terence McKenna emphasizes ideas related to human consciousness and the way that the universe is progressing. And by tying those two things together, you can begin to understand physical, mental, chemical laws that bind us to our conscious way of thinking. I think this is extremely important to the way that human evolution is headed currently, because we're beginning to become more and more aware of our impact on the world and our impact on society and technology as well. So Terence McKenna was born November 16th of 1946, and he tragically passed away April 3rd of the year 2000. He attended a couple different colleges and also traveled well around the world.
Hey, what's up there, Junkron?
Well, I'm actually giving a book report right now, so you're going to have to not interrupt me. Yeah. Well, okay, so Terence McKenna began lecturing during the 1980s, and he had an emphasis on felt experience as opposed to dogmatic religion in terms of conscious thinking. Many people are bound to societal and dogmatic and religious laws that constrict and monitor their way of thinking passionately. Well, Terence McKenna emphasized, be your own free person, have your own opinion, but recognize the laws of the universe that constrict us, not the laws of society and social caste systems. So you can begin to understand that Terence McKenna emphasized the expansion of human consciousness, and he began to go about this by analyzing 2 properties of the universe that are fundamental: habit and novelty. Habit exists as a similarity, a sameness. If I put a hot glass of tea out on the windowsill, it'll begin to cool down and become like the atmosphere around it. Whereas novelty is newness, it's a change. You can see that elements bind together to form molecules, and that in turn form organisms and compounds and live forms, myself, composed of these small bits of novelty. But novelty expands much further than that too. We are just almost the threshold of novelty. I can foresee into the future and have an idea that I could begin to realize. I could practice something and remain persistent, develop a talent, create something new, a new masterpiece of art, a new technology. Terence analyzed this as a very fundamental aspect of advancing technology. He said, you know what, if we look down at these very small components of novelty, this newness, this change of difference, of similarity, we can begin to build that up and combine it and complexify it, recomplexify, and create something new, something incredibly new that is not even fathomable by humans yet. So Terence McKenna's ideas of novelty and habit include such ancient philosophies as ontology, the nature of being, the nature of existing, the details of existence, and extropy, which is typically the opposite of entropy. If entropy is where something dissipates, extropy is where something complexifies and builds itself up and produces and conserves itself. And he also emphasized eschatology, which are the final events. So you can begin to see how he is saying the nature of being is to condense until it comes to an end point, which is basically his sum of conscious thinking in the universe in one. So it's a little bit vague, but I'll go on. Terence McKenna emphasized that the universe was an engine for production and conservation of energy. You see, we have brilliant stars and solar systems and galaxies all thriving and becoming more and more condensed. You know, as the universe expands, these galaxies are still pouring into themselves, like spinning down a drain almost into a black hole. He also was able to measure this exchange of increase and decrease in novelty as a time wave fractal, he called it. And over the past 25,000 years, he was able to graph the fluctuation of human consciousness. As you can see from the previous ice age, as languages developed and rudimentary technologies were developed, he says there's an increase in novelty. But then perhaps like during the Dark Ages, when there was not so much technological advancement, we had more of a decrease in novelty as a human species. So he was able to measure this during different time periods accurately. But what is most interesting about his novelty theory and his time wave fractal is that it actually, as he graphed it, it came to an asymptote, or a measurement beyond perception. It became basically a point on a graph, actually on the date of December 21st, 2012. Now, I'm no conspiracist, but when you're able to mathematically prove this this novelty trend, a trend, and continue the trend on into the future, it's quite interesting to see the way that his inspiring thinking is influencing the rest of the world, or how history has influenced the rest of the world, and his inspiring thinking coincides with that. Now, Terence also has a very controversial perspective on human consciousness and technological advancement. He was an advocate of taking psychedelic substances to improve and expand one's perspective on consciousness. One of his most interesting theories is how primates evolved into modern-day humans. He says, you know, perhaps as the forest lines receded in the climate change of Earth and the grasslands became more prominent, humans, or early primates, dropped down from the trees and began trying new food sources from the floor. One of those, he argued, was perhaps psychedelic mushrooms. Now, what's interesting about this is from his personal experience, he was able to hypothesize that by taking the mushrooms, early primates developed synesthesia, which is basically a combination or the blur of senses. Perhaps with synesthesia, I could taste a color or smell a sound, you know. So these early primates began to combine their senses of sight and hearing and smell more acutely than perhaps previous ancestors had in the past. He also argued that the early mushrooms could have produced glossolalia, which is the speaking of tongues. We're led to believe that perhaps in the past many of our ancient ancestors spoke with throat noises, grunts, and nasal sounds, you know, just kind of, you know, just breathing. But glossolalia began them using the movement of their tongues to create noises, and they may have begun to develop a language slowly but surely. Now, it's also what he goes on to hypothesize, which is very interesting but uncannily possible, is that the mushroom is not an indigenous thing of the planet Earth. Arguably, the temperature or average temperature of space is, I believe, negative 220 degrees. And this is actually the approximate temperature that you want to keep a spore at. So he argues that spores can survive in space. Secondly, he analyzes the molecular structure of the psychedelic component in the mushroom, which is called psilocybin. And there's actually no other molecule on the planet Earth that is even remotely similar to this, that occurs naturally. You know, typically in botany and trees and whatnot, you'll find very many similarities in molecular structure, but the mushroom is its own entity. Also, the mushroom has only been around for 40 million years. It's a relatively new thing on the planet. The oldest fossil records are said to only exist because previous ones were they were soft tissue mushrooms. You know, they could not be preserved in a fossil. So Terence McKenna actually believes, or at least hypothesized and lectured, that the psychedelic mushroom could be extraterrestrial probe, to say. Perhaps these